Hello everyone, welcome to astrologynewsreport.com. Today is June 22nd, 2014.
Presenting an alternate view of world events as seen through the lens of Vedic astrology.
I'm Ron Berger.
And I'm David Anton Savage. Let's take a look at the week that was.
All through last week, the Mars-Uranus opposition was getting closer and closer to being exact, thereby strengthening this celestial energy pattern and manifesting as more dramatic events.
It's the planet of war sending its energy to the planet of rebellion. Checking in around the world, we can't help but notice how rebellions everywhere have been notching up into greater intensity.
The main event is the continuing exploits of ISIL, or ISIS if you prefer, the Sunni insurgent group that has turned Iraq upside down over the past couple of weeks.
The post-Saddam, post-U.S. occupied nation has never really been united as a country. This battered part of the globe threatens to break apart in what promises to be an ugly civil war, and this time without the presence of the U.S. military or even a bad guy dictator's ghost to slow things down.
It's a major problem for Western powers. First of all, there is the reality that the entire Middle East region could become one big sectarian conflict zone without respect to any borders.
The other really critical factor to consider: Iraq delivers an important percentage of the world's oil supply, and we are talking about one of the last best sources of the easy-to-recover, light, sweet crude on the planet that is running out of this crucial resource.
As we predicted in last week's show, since boots on the ground isn't politically acceptable due to the attitude of the U.S. public, the only palatable way for the U.S. military to participate is to send in the drones, which Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki is openly calling for.
But not so fast. Turns out Obama's not been happy with the way al-Maliki has been running the show in Iraq. So there are conditions attached to any U.S. help, namely some major political changes to Iraq's government, which may include throwing al-Maliki under the bus.
But if the U.S. doesn't pitch in, that's as good as forcing al-Maliki into the arms of Iran, and with Saudi Arabia backing the Sunnis, it's setting the stage for some serious sectarian warfare.
Yes, the plot thickens, like getting caught in a tar pit.
Meanwhile, the actions of the rebel separatists in eastern Ukraine now include sabotage. Last Tuesday, there was a big explosion on the main pipeline that transports Russian natural gas through Ukraine to Europe.
The potential for what is going on in Ukraine to have effects beyond its borders is no longer a matter of speculation.
And moving on to another continent, the violent acts of African Islamist extremist groups erupted in Kenya last week. Gunmen killed dozens in the coastal town of Makatoni.
All right, well, in recent weeks we have been hearing about Boko Haram causing increasing havoc in Nigeria. Now, on the other side of that continent, Al-Shabaab threatens the stability of yet another African country.
And, as we predicted, as another manifestation of Mars opposite Uranus, the World Cup has delivered some shocking upsets early on.
Yes, the defending World Cup champion Spain is already effectively out after losing twice in opening group play.
And the same fate was dished out to England as well after being handed their second loss via the cleats of Uruguay, in spite of having so many strong players.
In yet another surprising outcome, the tiny country of Costa Rica beat Italy in group play. This loss threatens Italy's bid for the World Cup as well. Who's next to get kicked out?
That's right, soccer fans of the world, take notice. Mars, the planet of sports, is opposite Uranus, the planet of sudden, unexpected events, shocks, and surprises. Meaning that the powerhouse teams, who are expected to win, are not safe from being eliminated.
What glorious astrological timing it is for World Cup thrills. Let victory come to those teams who add inspiration and panache to skillful play. Mars and Uranus are on your side. Just keep your hands to yourself.
Okay, moving on. Mercury, the planet of communications and the media, has been in a retrograde phase since June 7th. When the planet of rational thinking is traveling backwards in the heavens, the energy is ripe for going back over previous ideology and decisions made in the past.
And so, in the case of the USA's reaction to the new crisis developing in Iraq, there's been a lot of rethinking of what the hell was that 8 years of war, killing, and expenditure for? And did we pull out too soon?
In other words, the real question is, did Americans die in vain? And are we ready for a sequel?
Let me take a guess, Ron. Yes and no in that order?
Okay, David. Retrograde Mercury in the sign Gemini is the planet of thinking going backwards in the sign of multiple points of view. So what are we getting for results, astrologically speaking? Dramatically different ways of interpreting a situation, coming from all the various factions.
One blatant case of Mercury retrograde, Reworking the Facts, was an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal last week, penned by Dick Cheney and his daughter Liz, which basically laid the blame for the Iraq War and the current failure of the nation-building efforts on Barack Obama.
Sounds like old Dick is having some memory loss.
Yes. Continuing on, Mercury is the planet of making decisions, as well as the planet of math, and therefore counting. Mercury retrograde periods are not favorable for having elections. The recent runoff election in Afghanistan is a clear example. It has run into major problems due to serious fraud allegations.
Mercury is the planet of facts and data. Mercury retrograde means going back over the facts. After having to issue yet another recall of their cars, this time 3 million more vehicles for the same problem, in other words, the faulty ignition switch, GM is once again called before a congressional investigation committee.
And once again, the CEO of the company can't find any heads to offer up to the politicians eager to exact some retribution by now.
And one more example of Mercury retrograde signifying going back over the data. Pilot Zahari Shah has been identified as the chief suspect in the official investigation of the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines flight MH370.
A thorough analysis of the hard drive of the flight simulator owned by the pilot revealed routes programmed for far out into the Indian Ocean. Also, he was the only one on board who had no work or social engagements planned after the date of that now infamous flight.
And so we conclude this week's Review of the Week. Be sure to click in with us next week.